I want to tell you something about the kind of man I am. Before I tell you what I did, I am not a man who makes speeches. I don't post things on the internet when I'm hurting. I don't call people at midnight to tell them how I feel. I was raised in Southeast DC by a man who believed that your actions were your autobiography and everything else was just noise. My father worked 2 jobs for 30 years and never once asked anyone to notice. I am his son. My name is Arthur Preston. I am 54 years old. I spent 17 years being the most present, most reliable, most financially committed person in a family where I held no official title. I paid every bill. I showed up for every game. I sat at every table until the day they moved me to the back row dot, and then I stopped sitting anywhere at all. Her name is Diane Coleman. I met her on a Saturday afternoon at Greater Hope Baptist Church on Rhode Island Avenue. At a fish fry I almost didn't attend because it was hot and I had a project in the garage that needed finishing. She was laughing at something when I walked in. Not performing a laugh, actually laughing, head back, completely unself-conscious. The kind of laugh that makes you want to know what the joke was. She had a 7-year-old daughter with braids and a gap-toothed smile who stood behind her mother's. Legan peeked at me from around the edge like I was a puzzle she hadn't decided was worth solving yet. That was Jasmine. I fell for both of them that afternoon. Maybe the daughter first, if I'm being honest. There is something about a little kid who looks at you sideways to decide if you're worth trusting. It makes you want to be. Jasmine's biological father was a man named Marcus Webb. I learned about him the way you learn about weather that already passed in pieces, over years, without ever getting the full picture. He had been in and out of their lives, mostly out. He showed up for birthdays when he remembered, which wasn't often. He never paid child support. I know because I once asked Diane about it and she waved her hand like she was dismissing a fly. That's between me and him, she said. You're the one who's here. I was the one who was here. I want y'all to hold on to that sentence. It comes back later. I moved them out of their apartment on Benning Road and into the house I've been paying on for 6 years in Bowie, Maryland. 3 bedrooms, a fenced yard, a garage I converted into a workshop, my name on the mortgage, my name on the deed. My father had told me one thing before he died. Keep your name on what you built, son. Love doesn't need a deed to prove itself. I never added Diane's name to the property. Not because I didn't trust her, I did then, but because my father's voice was in me, and it made a kind of sense I didn't feel the need to explain. Diane never asked about the deed. I took that as understanding. Maybe it was just patience. Maybe it was something else entirely. I wouldn't know for 17 more years. I paid for Jasmine's braces at 30. I drove her to volleyball practice 3 nights a week at Bowie High and sat in the bleachers with the other parents, the real ones, the ones with permanent seats and laminated schedules, and I clapped when she served an ace and said nothing. When she missed, I helped her with her college essays at the kitchen table, the one by the window where the afternoon light came in, right? She'd chew the end of her pen and squint at the page, and I'd say, just write it like you're talking to me. She got into Howard University on a partial scholarship. The rest was me, tuition, textbooks, a used Nissan Sentra her sophomore year when the Metro schedule stopped making sense for her overnight clinical shifts, a co-signed apartment lease off Georgia Avenue because her credit wasn't built yet, monthly transfers, emergency Venmos at 2 a.m. when her debit card bounced. At the campus bookstore, I didn't keep a running tab. That's not what fathers do, at least. That's what Diane always told me. She used the word real a lot when she talked about what I was to Jasmine. Real father, real family. This is what real looks like. I should have paid more attention to that word. Marcus showed up maybe twice a year. Christmas sometimes. Jasmine's birthday if it fell on a weekend. He'd pull up in whatever car he was driving that month. Always something flashy. Never paid off, and lean against the hood like he'd invented fatherhood. Take Jasmine to lunch. Bring her back with new sneakers or a necklace from the mall. Disappear for another 6 months. Never a check. Never a school morning alarm. Never a 2 a.m. Venmo. Never a single line on a college application. But he always showed up with a grin. And I noticed that Jasmine's face changed when he did. I didn't say anything about that. It wasn't my place to. The morning of Jasmine's graduation from nursing school at Howard University, I was in the bathroom at 7:15 trying to get my tie straight. Navy blue, the one Diane picked out 3 Christmases ago. She said it made me look distinguished. I believed her because I wanted to dot. My hands were shaking slightly. Not from nerves, from excitement. For years of everything I had poured into that girl were about to walk across a stage in a cap and gown, and I was going to be in the room when it happened. I heard Diane's voice through the bedroom wall. Low and fast, the speed and register she uses when she doesn't want me to hear. I turned off the faucet. The pipes groaned quiet. I caught the end of a sentence. He'll sit in the back. He won't even notice. A pause. Arcus is her father, Arthur. You have to understand that. Another pause. I'll handle it. I stood there with water dripping off my hands, looking at myself in the mirror. The face looking back was the face of a man who had just heard something he already knew but had been refusing to read for a very long time. I dried my hands slowly. I hung the towel on the rack. I walked into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. Diane came in a minute later with her phone behind her back like a teenager hiding cigarettes. She smiled. That wide, warm smile I'd fallen for 17 years ago at a fish fry on Rhode Island Avenue. You almost ready? She asked. I nodded. I didn't say a word about what I'd heard. I wanted to see how far she'd carry it. The drive was quiet. Diane angled her phone screen away from me. I watched the road, Route 52, the Beltway, then up through Northwest toward campus. The cherry blossoms were gone by then, but the trees still had that early summer brightness. The kind that makes everything feel like a promise that hasn't broken yet. Crampton Auditorium was warm and loud, packed with families fanning themselves. With programs, I found Jasmine's name in the booklet. Jasmine Renee Webb. Not Coleman, not my last name. Nobody had asked if I wanted it there. I told myself it didn't matter. Names are just names. Diane led me to a row near the middle. Good seats, clear sight lines, exactly where you'd want to be. Then she stopped, glanced at her phone, and said casually, the way you'd ask someone to pass the salt, actually, baby, can you move back a few rows? I'm saving these for Jasmine's sorority sisters. They're running late. I looked at the 4 empty seats beside her. I looked at her face. She didn't blink. Sure, I said. I moved back 5 rows and sat on the aisle. I set the white roses Jasmine's favorites, white with baby's breath in my lap. I sat there for 20 minutes, watching the seats beside. Diane stay empty. Then a man walked in, tall, gray at the temples, leather jacket despite it being 78 degrees. The easy, unhurried walk of a man who has never been afraid of being late because he's always assumed the room would wait for him. Marcus. Webb sat down right next to my wife. She leaned over and said something. He laughed. They looked comfortable together, like people who had rehearsed this scene a few times before the actual performance. He pulled out his phone and took a selfie with the stage behind him, posted it before the first name was called. I know because Jasmine's cousin liked it, and a notification appeared on my phone while I was sitting 5 rows behind the man who had just taken my seat. The caption read, "Proud father moment. My baby girl did it." I felt a thorn from the roses press into my palm. I didn't let go. When Jasmine's name was called, she walked across that stage with her chin up and her tassel swinging, and I stood in row 12 holding flowers. Nobody was looking. For an eye cheered for her the way I had always cheered for her, from wherever they put me, with everything I had. Afterward, I found her near the side exit. Diane was hugging her. Marcus had his arm around her shoulder, posing for a photo. I walked up and held out the roses. Jasmine smiled, The kind of smile that's already halfway through you before it reaches the eyes. She said, "Thanks, Dad, Arthur." 2 words with a wall built between them. Marcus shook my hand. Firm, confident. The handshake of a man who believes he is welcoming you somewhere, rather than standing in a place you built. He said, "Good to finally meet the man who's been holding." Itdaughter looked at his hand around mine. I thought about every tuition check, every oil change, every $20 slipped into Jasmine's coat pocket on her way out the door before she thought to ask. He said, "Takes a village, right?" I let go of his hand. I stepped back, didn't say another word. Diane glanced at me and mouthed, "Thank you." Then she turned back to Marcus and laughed at something he said. I drove home alone. Her text came while I was sitting in the driveway with the engine ticking as it cooled and the streetlights coming on one by one down Fox Hill Lane. "Jasmine wants a small family dinner, just her and her parents. You understand why I love you?" I read it twice. Her parents. I was not included in that. Word. I went inside. The house was dark in a way that felt deliberate, like it had already started the process of forgetting me. I sat at the kitchen table, my chair, the one closest to the window, and I put my phone face down and I let the hurt settle into something heavy and quiet. Something that didn't need to yell. Something that was already becoming a decision. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed watching the ceiling fan move in slow, useless circles until the sky turned gray. Then I got up. I made coffee. I stood at the counter to drink it because sitting at that table felt wrong now, like a seat that had already been reassigned up. By 8 in the morning, I had made 3 decisions. By 9, I had started on the first one. I called PNC Bank, the A branch on Route 301, the one I'd been with for 22 years. Since before the house, before Diane, before all of it. I asked them to pull every automatic transfer connected to Jasmine's accounts. The college fund, the car insurance, the monthly rent transfer for the apartment off Georgia Avenue that I co-signed because her credit wasn't built yet, the woman. On the phone paused. "You want to stop all of them? Today?" I said yes. I called the apartment management company and informed them. I was withdrawing as co-signer at the earliest contractually allowable date. Then I called Denise Harding, a realtor out of Crofton I'd met years ago at a neighborhood block. "Party," she answered on the first ring. I told her I was thinking of selling the house. She asked if I was sure. I said I was past sure. I was finished. She came by the next morning, walked every room, tapped the walls, checked the water pressure, paused in the kitchen and asked carefully, "Your wife know about this?" I said, "She's celebrating. I'll handle it." Denise nodded. "We can list by Friday?" I told her Friday worked. Diane came home that evening, glowing. She talked about the restaurant, about how wonderful Marcus's toast had been, about how Jasmine had cried. She did not ask me how I was. She did not notice the filing cabinet open in the spare room. She did not notice me sitting at the kitchen table with a manila envelope and the specific expression of a man who has finished reading something he can't unread. "You're quiet," she said on her way to bed. "Long day." I answered dot. She kissed my forehead and went to sleep. I sat at that table until midnight going through 17 years of receipts, checks, bank statements, every gap Marcus had left, every gap I had filled without being asked. The numbers told a complete story. Nobody had ever asked to hear it, until now. The offer came in 9 days. A couple from Silver Spring, Derek and Tanya Sims. He was an IT contractor. She taught 5th grade. They had a 3-year-old and a baby due in August. Pre-approved, ready to close fast. Denise called with the number. "They're asking 5 below." "List," she said. I thought about the kitchen table, the chair by the window, the spot I had always taken without anyone assigning it to me, and the spot I had just been moved from without anyone asking. I thought about a graduation program that said Jasmine Renee Webb and a text message that said just her parents. "Tell them yes," I said. I signed the papers on a Tuesday. The title office was cold and fluorescent. My hand was steady until the last page. Then it was done. I packed the truck over 3 nights. Only what mattered. My tools, my father's watch, the photograph of my mother from the mantle, my clothes, a box of financial records I've been keeping since before I met Diane. I left the rest exactly as she'd arranged it. Every pillow, every candle, every framed family photo. I left it all in place, in a house that no longer belonged to anyone who hadn't earned it. I rented a small apartment in Annapolis near the water, 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, a window that looked out over the Chesapeake if you leaned a little. It was quiet in a way that felt chosen instead of leftover. Diane found out on a Saturday afternoon. I know because my realtor texted me at 2:47 p.m. She's at the house. New owners answered. It's loud. I was sitting at a crab shack on West Street eating a sandwich. I put the phone down and chewed slowly. I thought about Diane standing on that porch. I thought about her face. I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel guilty. I felt clear. She called 14 times. I answered on the 5th, 10th. Her voice came through the phone hot and fractured. Arthur, what did you do? Where is my house? I said, it was my house. You just lived in it. She went into threats. Lawyers. How dare I, how she had given me the best years of her life. I listened for a while. Then I said, Diane, you gave me the bill for the best years of your life. That's different. She hung up. Jasmine called 20 minutes later. Her voice was quieter than her mother's, tighter, like someone holding something breakable very carefully. She said 1 word. Why? I said. Ask your mother. Ask her who sat 5 rows back at your graduation. Ask her who paid every bill you're real. A father never touched. Then ask yourself who you sent that dinner invitation to. Silence. Diane's voice sharp in the background. Jasmine said, I didn't think you'd actually. I said, that's the problem. Nobody thought I would. The line went quiet. Then she hung up. The mediation hearing in Upper Marlboro smelled like old carpet and industrial soap. I wore my navy blazer, the one I saved for funerals and occasions I wish were funerals. Diane arrived first, heels too loud for the hallway, a young lawyer beside her with a briefcase that still had the tag scar on the handle. Jasmine came in. Behind her, eyes down, phone in her hand like a lifeline, and behind Jasmine, Marcus Webb, arms crossed, leather jacket, leaning against the back wall like a man with a front row ticket to somebody else's fire. The mediator was a woman in her late 50s, glasses on a chain, the voice of a librarian who has seen considerably too much of human nature to be surprised by any of it. She opened the file, looked up, and said, We're here about the property on Fox Hill Lane. Let's keep it civil. Diane's lawyer went immediately. Abandonment, marital home, emotional distress. I let the words stack up like dishes in a sink. When the mediator turned to me, I stood. I placed my envelope on the table. It landed with a soft, flat sound. I said, The house was titled solely in my name. Always has been. I purchased it 6 years before the marriage. I paid the mortgage, I paid the taxes. Inside that envelope is the deed, the full mortgage history, and a complete record of every payment I made toward my stepdaughter's education, transportation, housing, and living expenses over 17 years. I slid it forward. Diane said, Money isn't what this is about, Arthur. I said, It was when it was mine. The room shifted. I felt it in my chest before I saw it on anyone's face. The mediator read. She didn't rush. Diane leaned forward. Marcus stepped forward and said, I'm her father. She grew up in that house. I turned to him. For the first time, I really looked at him. Same jacket, same grin, same man who had never written a child support. Checker set an alarm clock for a school morning. I said, Did you ever pay child support? The grin left his face like a light going off. I said, I have receipts for every gap you left. Braces, tuition, car payments, rent deposits, grocery runs, medical bills. 17 years of gaps with your name on them? Jasmine looked up. Her eyes were wet. But there was something else underneath the tears. The same expression she'd had in 5th grade the first time she understood something that had been confusing her for weeks. Not happiness, exactly, just the particular clarity of a person who had stopped being deceived. The mediator closed the file. There is no legal basis to challenge this sale. We're done here. Outside, the sun hit the packing lot hard and bright. I stood on the courthouse steps and breathed air that tasted like it belonged to me. Jasmine came out last. She stopped a few feet away. She didn't touch me. She didn't apologize yet. She just said, quietly, I didn't know about all of it. The money, the bills. Mom never told me. I said, I know. She said, I shouldn't have let them move you to the back row. I should have said something. Okay, that one landed behind my ribs in the exact place where the old hurt lived. I said, no, you shouldn't. We stood there in the kind of silence that doesn't need filling. Just how winter came early to Annapolis that year. The Chesapeake turned the color of old iron, and the wind off the water rattled my windows. I bought a space heater. I learned to cook fish without burning it. Small victories. I started going to the VFW post on West Street on Thursday nights. There was a man there named Luther Gibbons, 83 years old, Korean War veteran, hands like leatherwork gloves, eyes that didn't miss anything. He sat on the same stool every week with the same beer. One night he looked at me sideways and said, You got that look? I said, What look? He said, like a man who just set down something heavy and doesn't know what to do with his hands yet. I laughed. The first real one in weeks. He said, You'll figure it out. The hands always find something new to hold. Jasmine texted me in November. One line, can we talk? I sat with it for a long time. I thought about her at 7 years old, peeking at me from behind her mother's leg. I thought about the kitchen table and the pen she chewed and the essays we wrote together in the afternoon light. I wrote back, When you're ready to listen to. We met at a coffee shop on Main Street in Annapolis, neutral ground. She looked older. Tired, maybe, or just honest for the first time in a while. She told me Marcus had stopped returning her calls 3 weeks after the courthouse. He had come to the graduation because her mother asked him to. He posted the selfie, got his moment, and disappeared. He hadn't answered since. I didn't say I told you so. Silence said it better. She said, I'm sorry. Not about the house. About the back row. I saw them move you, and I didn't say anything, and I should have. I said, apologies don't fix it, but they're a start. Finished. Our coffee. She hugged me on the sidewalk, brief and slightly awkward. The embrace of two people who were learning how to stand in the same space again after the floor changed. It wasn't a happy ending. It was an honest one. I could live with that these days. I sit by the water most mornings with a thermos and a folding chair, the cheap kind that takes an extra minute to open. I watch the bay wake up slow and gray and completely unbothered by anything humans are doing on its shore. Luther was right. The hands find something new. I started building birdhouses in my kitchen. Cedar and pine. Nothing fancy, small, simple, the kind that does one job and does it well. I give them to the neighbors. It's not much, but it's mine. Some nights I still think about that chair at the kitchen table. The one by the window with the good afternoon light, the one I always sat in without anyone assigning it to me. And pushed in quietly after every meal because somewhere along the way I had learned to make myself a little smaller. As if taking up less space might guarantee my place. 17 years of that. I don't do it anymore. Here's what it took me. 17 years and one graduation ceremony to understand completely. Sacrifice without acknowledgement is just servitude with a better story attached to it. And when someone tells you that you are family right up until someone more convenient walks through the door, believe what they show you, not what they say, not the word real, not the warm smile, what they actually do when the choice has to be made. If you have ever been the one paying the bills while someone else took the bow, if you have ever been quietly moved to the back row of your own life and told to understand, I hope you hear this. You do not have to yell to take your power back. You do not have to break anything. You do not have to make a scene in a parking lot or send a long text at midnight. Sometimes, all you have to do is stop holding up a roof that was never meant to shelter. You walk out into the open air. That is enough. That is everything.